A liberal journalist publicly mocks Jungkook during a live forum, but his calm, cutting response silences the entire room in a moment no one saw coming. You call that leadership, or just a well-groomed puppet? The microphone quivered in her manicured hand as the words sliced through the dimly lit press conference like a scalpel. Gasps rippled through the seated crowd of executives and interns, suits stiffening as if to shield their wearers from the sudden shift in the atmosphere. Camera lenses clicked. Phones stopped mid-record. All eyes turned toward him. Jungkook didn't flinch. He sat poised in the center of the stage, the harsh spotlight carving his silhouette in steel. His navy blue suit absorbed the light, but his crimson tie seemed to bleed defiance into the sterile air of the hall. A pulse ticked faintly along his jawline, but his expression remained neutral, studied, unreadable. The woman holding the mic smirked. Jeon, a seasoned liberal journalist known for ambush questions and assassinations of character veiled as truth-seeking. She tilted her head, blonde bun tight, eyes sharp behind wireframe glasses. Her voice, elegant yet edged with venom, reverberated through the speakers. "Tell us, Mr. Jane," she purred. "Do you even know what you're doing, or are you just following a script someone richer wrote for you?" The silence that followed was thick, uneasy. You could hear the hum of the lights, the shallow breath of the intern in the third row, the soft static in the speakers like a storm waiting to break. Jungkook slowly leaned forward, resting his hands loosely between his knees. He studied her, not like a man calculating revenge, but like someone deciphering a foreign language. His lips parted slightly. The crowd held their breath. "You must be very afraid," he said quietly. It wasn't loud. It wasn't angry, but it cut deeper than any insult ever could. The tone measured, cool, devastating, landed like a stone in still water. Jeon blinked, caught off guard. "Afraid?" she echoed, her voice cracking slightly. Jungkook stood then, not abruptly, not with bravado. He rose like the tide, steady, inevitably. Only someone deeply afraid of losing control would try to humiliate another in public. His gaze swept the room, catching eyes, challenging them to look away. "But I understand. You've built a career on turning questions into knives, and today, I'm the target." Whispers stirred. Someone at the back coughed nervously. Jungkook took a step forward. "But here's the difference between us, Miss Rhee. You came here to expose something ugly. I came here to build something better. We don't have to agree." "But mockery," he paused, voice dipping, "is not courage. It's desperation." Jeon's smirk faltered. For a second, the room seemed to lean toward Jungkook, as if gravity itself had shifted. And just like that, he sat back down, still calm, still composed. Jeon lowered her mic, no follow-up. Behind her, the panel of executives exchanged glances, impressed, surprised. Someone murmured, "He's different." Jungkook's hands folded in his lap. Inside, a storm he refused to show raged on. Memories of his father's downfall, the public disgrace, the late nights training himself not to react. The therapist who once told him, "Stillness can be your armor." He looked straight ahead, unblinking. The press officer moved on to the next question, but no one was really listening. Everyone was still processing the man who had just turned humiliation into poetry and silence into power. The next morning, headlines screamed, Jungkook shuts down liberal journalist in stunning moment of live TV. Jungkook's silence speaks louder than politics. A puppet no more. Jungkook breaks the image. But inside Jungkook's private green room at Yongsan Broadcasting Tower, the air was thick. Not with silence, but with conflict. "What the hell was that?" snapped his campaign director, Min Seo-jun, slamming a stack of folders onto the table. "You went off script." You weren't supposed to engage her, especially not like that. Jungkook didn't answer immediately. He stood by the wide window, watching Seoul blink and stretch beneath the rising Sunday. His reflection in the glass looked like someone else, someone older, someone lonelier. "I didn't go off script," he said finally. "I just stopped pretending I had one. You think this is noble? This is politics, not a TED Talk." Seo-jun spat, rubbing his temples. "She baited you. You took it. We lose in the polls when you look emotional, no matter how poetic it sounds." Jungkook turned slowly. "I didn't sound emotional. I sounded real." A tense silence settled. Then the door creaked open, and a younger aide stepped in, breathless. "He's here." Seo-jun straightened. "Who?" The aide hesitated, eyes flicking to Jungkook. "Han Do-yun, from the ministry." The temperature in the room dropped. Han Do-yun, the Shadow Kingmaker, the man who whispered into the ears of ministers and buried scandals before they became stories. He wasn't supposed to care about candidates like Jungkook, young, idealistic, unfunded. Unless, of course, Jungkook had just become dangerous. The hallway outside was already filling with quiet footsteps and suit jackets. Do-yun entered without knocking. He looked ordinary, slender, understated. But his eyes, coal, black, and unreadable, swept the room with surgical precision before landing on Jungkook. "You surprised us," he said. "No hello, no titles." Jungkook remained still. "Is that a compliment?" "It's a complication," Do-yun replied smoothly, walking to the center of the room. "The press wants blood now. Half the networks are saying you exposed her. The other half are accusing you of silencing a woman. Congratulations, you've managed to alienate both sides. I didn't come here to please either side." "That's adorable." Do-yun smiled faintly. "But naive." Seo-jun stepped forward. "Why are you here?" Do-yun ignored him. "I have an offer," he said, eyes still on Jungkook. "Withdraw from the race. Announce you're taking time to refocus your values. You'll disappear for 6 months. Then we reintroduce you in a more controlled environment. Documentary. Soft interviews. Emotional redemption arc. People love comebacks." "I'm not stepping down." "You should." "I won't." The room thickened with silence. Do-yun stepped closer. "You're not ready for what's coming, Jungkook. You think this is about media and debates. It's not. It's about secrets, skeletons, sacrifices, and you're too clean. You shine too bright. And people who shine too bright," he leaned in, voice barely above a whisper, "they attract fire." Jungkook didn't blink. "Then let it burn." For the first time, Do-yun's expression changed. Something flickered surprise, admiration. It vanished before it could be named. He nodded once, then turned to leave. "You'll be hearing from us again." When the door closed behind him, Seo-jun exhaled shakily. "You have no idea what you've just done." Jungkook looked back out the window. The city kept moving, unaware of the war quietly unfolding behind tinted glass. "I've done exactly what I came here to do," he murmured. Later that evening, Jungkook returned to his apartment, an unassuming high-rise tucked between office towers. No guards, no staff, just him and the echo of his own decisions. The lights were off. The silence wasn't comforting. On the table sat an old photo, his father, Jimin, shaking hands with a man whose face was blurred by time and scandal. That handshake had destroyed his family, the corruption trial, the suicide, the whispers, the reporters at the funeral. He picked up the frame and stared at it long. "I will not become him." A sharp knock broke the silence. He opened the door. It was Jean-Ri. No camera, no mic, just her, and a look on her face that was different, less smug, more haunted. "We need to talk," she said. Jungkook stepped aside, wordless. As she walked in, she dropped something on the table. A flash drive. And on it, she whispered, was something that could destroy a minister. Jungkook stared at it. Outside, the city glowed like a live wire. And deep beneath the silence, something was starting to crack. The flash drive sat between them like a loaded gun. Jungkook didn't reach for it. Neither did Jeon. The tension was unbearable, like a string pulled too tight between two violins, both waiting to play the first note of a song no one wanted to hear. "What's on it?" he asked, voice low. Jeon leaned back on his couch, exhaling as if she hadn't breathed since the press conference. Her blazer was wrinkled, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes that Jungkook hadn't seen before. Fear. "Do you remember the Yongwon landslide last year?" Jungkook's brow furrowed. "Of course. 34 people died. The government blamed it on illegal hillside farming. They lied." The words fell like bricks. "I have documents," she said. "Internal memos. Engineering reports. A full audit they buried literally. The ministry approved a private energy company to drill into that slope. They ignored warnings from their own geologists. The foundation collapsed. It was murder, dressed as negligence." Jungkook's voice sharpened. "And you've had this. How long?" Jeon's jaw clenched. 4 months. 4. "You don't get it," she snapped, leaning forward. "The moment I received this, 2 of my sources disappeared. One of them was found in a motel, suicide. The other vanished. His family thinks he fled to Canada, but I know better. These aren't rumors, Jungkook. This is national scandal, and if I'd published it, I'd be dead." He stared at her. The woman who had tried to shred his dignity in front of millions now sat in his living room, trembling as the walls around her ideals crumbled. "Why give it to me?" Jeon looked up, suddenly exhausted. "Because you didn't flinch. You didn't yell. You didn't crumble. I came at you like I've come at every hollow man in a suit. And you didn't crack. That's not strength. That's something else. And I don't know why, but..." She swallowed hard. "I think you might be the only one left who hasn't sold their soul." Jungkook rose to his feet and walked to the window, the city buzzing below like an electric hive. He felt the weight of her words settle into his spine like cold metal. He turned back to her. "This can't just be leaked. It'll vanish, and so will we. It has to be exposed from the inside." "You mean..." "I'm going to the funeral." Jeon blinked. "What funeral?" Jungkook's voice dropped. "Minister Park's wife died yesterday. The funeral's in 2 days. Every top-level official will be there. Han Do-yoon, the president's aides, even the men behind Yongwon. That's where I'll start asking the questions publicly. On record. No edits. No filters." Jeon stood up, heart pounding. "They'll eat you alive. I'm counting on it." 2 days later, the funeral was a fortress. Black sedans lined the gates of the Daehan National Memorial Hall. Umbrellas shielded the faces of Korea's most powerful men from both rain and cameras. Their condolences were rehearsed, their tears shallow. And at the center of it all, Minister Park, stoic, shaking hands with ghosts. Jungkook arrived last. No press entourage, no security, just a single white lily in his hand and a storm in his chest. He walked past the mourners, past the guards, past the carefully curated performance of grief, and stepped right up to Minister Park. The minister looked up, startled. "John Jungkook." "I'm sorry for your loss," Jungkook said, bowing. "But I need to speak with you." "This isn't the time," Park said tightly. "It is," Jungkook replied, "because your wife's death was real, unlike the condolences from half the men in this room." Gasps. Eyes turned. Seo-jun, in the crowd, looked like he might vomit. Park's face darkened. I don't know what you're playing at, but this is not how things are done. Jungkook pulled the flash drive from his coat pocket and held it between them. This is how I do them. Do-yoon was already moving from across the room, his face stone. But Jungkook raised his voice. 34 people died in Yongwon. You signed the permits, you ignored the warnings, and you buried the truth beneath excuses and bribes. Cameras weren't supposed to be here. But someone, Jeon, probably had smuggled one in. Lenses, zoom it. The room ignited. Minister Park lunged forward, grabbing Jungkook by the collar. You arrogant little bastard. You think this stunt will make you a hero? Jungkook didn't move. No, but it might make you accountable. The security guards reached them, hands on shoulders, tension about to snap. But then, a voice spoke. Not Jungkook, not Park. An old man, General Hwang, retired army, now advisor to the president. He stepped forward slowly, face pale, hands trembling. It's true, he said quietly. Everyone froze. General Hwang nodded once, then looked at Minister Park. You told us it was under control. I signed it because you said it was safe. A crack, a fracture in the mask. And it was enough. The moment hit the networks within the hour. Jungkook confronts Minister Park at funeral corruption confession, caught on camera. The nation exploded. By midnight, protesters gathered outside the ministry. People began digging up old permits. Whistleblowers started talking. And in a quiet apartment, Jeon sat alone, watching her own footage air for the first time, raw, uncut, unstoppable. At the window, Jungkook stood watching the chaos bloom. He didn't smile. He just waited for the fire to come. It began with a siren. At 3:17 a.m., Jungkook was jolted awake by the distant wail of an ambulance screaming down Mapodero. He sat up in the darkness, drenched in cold sweat. The flash drive was still on his desk, beside his laptop, next to a crumpled newspaper with a headline in bold red letters. Minister Park, under investigation after on. Camera confrontation. He wasn't dreaming. He had done it. The nation was already calling it the funeral reckoning. But beneath the rising public rage, Jungkook knew the silence behind power was beginning to shift, and it would not go quietly. His phone buzzed. An encrypted message from an unknown number. You were warned. They don't lose. They erase. Jungkook stared at the screen, unmoving. Then, without a word, he picked up the flash drive and locked it in a drawer. Just as he turned to sit down again, the window shattered. Glass exploded inward like a shrapnel storm. He hit the ground just before the Molotov smashed against the wall behind him, bursting into flame. Heat roared to life. Smoke coiled violently through the room. Alarm screamed. Through the blur, Jungkook heard footsteps running down the fire escape. He didn't chase. He crawled through the smoke, choking, reached for the desk drawer. The flash drive was gone. The fire department arrived minutes later. His apartment was scorched, but he was alive. Burned, bruised, coughing, but alive. Jeon arrived at the hospital before sunrise. He was sitting on the edge of the hospital bed, shirtless, bandaged, 4, still in his arm. His expression was unreadable. Jeon's hands were shaking. She said nothing for a moment, just looked at the man who had walked into the lion's den and was now bleeding for it. They took it, he said quietly. Do you know who? He nodded once. Do-yeon, or someone he sent. Jeon swallowed. We have backups. They know that. He looked up at her, and for the first time, she saw the vulnerability in his eyes. Under the resolve, under the pride, was fear. Not for himself. Jeon, he said slowly, you need to go underground. She frowned. What are you talking about? You're the only other person with the original files. You're not safe. They'll find a way to silence you. I've seen how they work. They won't use threats. They'll ruin your name, your career, or worse. Jean crossed her arms. I'm not running. I'm not asking, he snapped, more harshly than intended. I need you alive, not martyred. She opened her mouth to argue, but then stopped. For the first time in a long time, someone wasn't trying to use her. Someone was trying to protect her. Her voice softened. Then what now? He inhaled slowly, the scent of antiseptic stinging his nose. I have a plan, but it requires something I didn't want to use. What? Jungkook turned to the small television in the hospital room. The news was playing on mute. Minister Park was being escorted from a government building, eyes hidden behind sunglasses, jaw clenched. Jungkook whispered, "My mother." That night, under a false name and a black hoodie, Jungkook slipped into an unlit car that took him through winding roads into the outskirts of Incheon. Jean wasn't with him. She'd gone dark under a different name, in a different city, with a burner phone and nothing but encrypted files. The car stopped in front of a humble hanok, the porch light off, curtains drawn. He hesitated, then knocked. The door opened slowly. His mother stood there, face older, colder than he remembered. Time had not softened her. She wore a black turtleneck, no makeup, hair tied back with military precision. Her voice was ice. I thought I buried that name. I didn't come here as your son. Then why are you here? I need your enemies. A silence stretched between them like a blade. She let him in. Inside, the house was silent, sparse, clinical. Not a single photo of him or his father. Just books, files, dustless discipline. He sat at the table. She poured tea but didn't touch hers. You never cared for power, she said flatly. You hated what it did to your father. I still do. Then why walk into it? Because someone has to burn the rot out. His mother studied him for a long, cold moment. Then she opened a drawer beside her and pulled out an old envelope. Inside were photos, blackmail material, leaked text messages, banking transactions in foreign currencies, secret meetings between government and private military contractors. She slid them across the table. I kept these to protect myself. Your father left them behind before he died. They're the real cost of survival in this country. You want a revolution, Jungkook? It won't come from press conferences. It'll come from what's done in the dark. He stared at the photos. His stomach turned. So, she asked softly, how far are you willing to go? Jungkook didn't blink. All the way. When he left the house 2 hours later, he had more than ammunition. He had a name. A man who wasn't just connected to Yongwon, but had brokered the original land contracts years before. A man who had paid off engineers, silenced whistleblowers, and according to one report was possibly behind the suicide of a former mayor who had tried to stop the project. His name was Yoon Tae-hwan, former chief of infrastructure, current head of national disaster response. And he was set to appear on a live broadcast in 48 hours. Jungkook already knew what he was going to do. He wasn't going to confront him. He was going to trap him live. And this time, the whole nation would be watching. The studio was colder than it looked on screen. Jungkook stood behind the black curtain, watching the stage come alive with blinding lights and practice smiles. Cameras rolled silently on slick tracks. Hosts rehearsed their lines in hushed tones. Assistants darted across the floor, headsets buzzing with urgency. It was a carefully orchestrated illusion, glossy, clean, comforting. But tonight, something real was going to bleed through. Across the stage, Yoon Tae-hwan adjusted his tie in the mirror, flanked by two aides whispering last-minute talking points. He looked relaxed, unshaken. As if the landslide, the deaths, the investigations, they were just background noise, already buried in paperwork and denials. He didn't know Jungkook was going to be there. Officially, the segment was called Rebuilding Trust, a conversation on public safety. Yoon Tae-hwan had agreed to it as a PR opportunity, part of his campaign to repair his shattered image. The producers, hungry for ratings, had invited Jungkook last minute, under the guise of a fresh youth perspective. No one told Yoon. Not until the red light turned on. 3, 2, 1, we're live. The host smiled into the camera. Good evening, Korea. Tonight, we bring you a very special broadcast on the aftermath of Yongwon and the future of public accountability. With us in the studio is former Chief of Infrastructure, now Head of Disaster Response, Yoon Tae-hwan. Polite applause. And joining us as well, youth activist, social reform advocate, and now one of the most talked about voices in the country, Jungkook. Yoon turned toward the second chair, his confident smile faltering for the briefest moment as Jungkook stepped into the light. Jungkook didn't smile. He simply sat down, slow and composed, locking eyes with Yoon like a chess master, making the first move without touching a piece. Let's begin, the host said, already sensing something electric. Mr. Yoon, you've stated that Yongwon was a tragedy no one could have foreseen, that it was a natural disaster, exacerbated by illegal land usage. Can you stand by that tonight? I can, Yoon replied smoothly. And I do. Our team has conducted several investigations. The mountain was unstable due to years of improper farming. No one is denying the loss, but we must be careful not to politicize a tragedy. Jungkook didn't even blink. And yet, Minister Park has been placed under investigation after admitting to approving those drilling permits you signed. Yoon laughed lightly. With all due respect, Mr. Jeon, I've been in public service for over 30 years. A permit doesn't mean I'm responsible for mudslides. That's the kind of thinking that turns democracy into witch hunts. Then, explain the wire transfers. Silence. Yoon's eyes narrowed. What wire transfers? Jungkook leaned forward, voice quiet, calculated. The 1.2 billion won sent to your offshore account in the Caymans, 8 days after the drilling rights were approved, from a private contractor Hanryu Earthworks, which was later dissolved after the landslide. The host froze. The camera crew flinched. The control room scrambled. Yoon Paled. I don't know what you're talking about, he said quickly. That's false. I have the files, Jungkook continued, pulling out a folder and sliding it across the glass table. You signed the contract. You ignored the geological warnings. Then you funneled the money out of the country and let others take the fall. Minister Park, the engineers, the farmers. People died, Mr. Yoon. Children. Yoon slammed his hand on the table. You smug little fraud. You think because the internet likes your speeches, you can accuse people on live television without consequences. Jungkook didn't flinch. This isn't about the internet. It's about 34 people who'll never breathe again because men like you put money over human lives. Yoon turned to the host, voice rising. This is slander. This is a setup. The host stammered. We need to, let's take a break. We're not taking a break, Jungkook said sharply, eyes on the camera now. Let the country see. Let them see what power does when no one's watching. The broadcast director's voice screamed into the host's earpiece. Don't cut the feed. The ratings just tripled. Yoon's jaw clenched. You think this ends here? You have no idea who you're up against. I know exactly who, Jungkook said coldly. And you should know something too. When people know the truth, they don't forget. They rise. Yoon stood, ripping off his mic, his voice venomous. "You're finished." Jungkook stood too, eyes locked with his. "I haven't even started." The cameras kept rolling as Yoon stormed off the set, surrounded by assistants shouting into phones. The studio erupted in chaos. Producers argued, lawyers barked. The host just sat there, stunned. The broadcast still lived, his hand trembling. And Jungkook? He walked off calmly, as if he'd just closed a chapter that had been waiting years to end. Outside the studio, a sea of people was already gathering. Screens showed the broadcast in real time. Some were crying. Others clapped. Many stood in stunned silence. Jeon was there, hidden in the crowd. She watched him step onto the pavement, his eyes scanning the crowd like a soldier returning from battle. Their eyes met. No words, but something passed between them, something larger than victory. It was grief, justice, the cost of truth. He reached her, and she handed him a second flash drive. "You were right," she said softly. "They erased the first, but they didn't know about the mirror server." He held it tight. "What now?" she asked. Jungkook looked up, beyond the cameras, beyond the crowd, toward the high towers where the real monsters lived. He whispered, "We go deeper." Because this wasn't the end. This was the part where the real war began. The air in the presidential Blue House was heavy with storm. Inside the Situation Room, far from the flashbulbs, far from applause, a silence had settled, cold and unnatural. A dozen men sat around a long, curved table. They wore tailored suits, silver pins, and expressions carved from stone. Every one of them had known Jungkook's name before last week. Now, they feared it. Han Do-yoon stood at the head of the table, arms crossed, eyes locked on the frozen image playing on the massive wall screen behind him. Jungkook, face composed, holding the folder of damning evidence against Yoon Tae-hwan. The video had gone viral in 22 countries. Do-yoon turned to the president's chief of staff. Why wasn't this contained? The man swallowed hard. "We tried. Multiple takedown orders, algorithms, but the stream was mirrored. Public download links, decentralized backups. We couldn't catch them all." Do-yoon's voice remained calm, but deadly. "And what about Yoon?" "He's gone underground." "Good. Let him rot there." Do-yoon moved to the screen and tapped it. The image changed to a satellite photo of Jungkook's route the night before. He'd visited his mother, the woman they had tried to erase from the records years ago, after Jimin's fall. Clearly, she hadn't disappeared. Clearly, she still had teeth. "We underestimated him," Do-yoon said. "That won't happen again." From the far corner of the room, a deep voice spoke. "You want him dead." Every head turned. It was General Hwang. He was old now, slower, but his words still carried weight like falling hammers. Do-yoon didn't answer right away. He walked back to his seat, sat down, and folded his hands. "No. Dead, he becomes a martyr. Alive, he becomes a weapon. But discredited, now that's an art." Across town, Jungkook and Jeon sat in a shuttered cafe owned by a journalist loyal to Jeon's late mentor. Rain tapped on the glass like impatient fingers. On the table between them, the second flash drive, a pile of old notebooks, 3 burner phones, and a steaming cup of untouched black coffee. Jungkook leaned forward. "If Taehyung falls, he'll try to cut a deal. Take others down with him. We can't let that happen. We need to strike first." Jeon tapped a pen on her notebook. "I've started compiling. There's a name that keeps repeating across every scandal you've touched. Bribes, land theft, blackmail, cover-ups. He shows up in quiet corners, never center stage. Like he was never meant to be seen." "Who?" Jeon turned the notebook toward him. "Chairman Seo Jin, Q. Taehyung Group. Jungkook stared at the name. He knew it. Everyone in Korea did. Daesun was a titan, a tech conglomerate, energy empire, and media leviathan all wrapped into one immaculate beast. Seo Jin-kyu was the invisible puppeteer, untouchable, hidden behind layers of foundations, charities, and shell companies. Jean spoke quietly. He's the one who funded Yongwon. Hanryu Earthworks was a dummy firm owned by a Daesun subsidiary. The land permits? Pushed through because Daesun wanted mineral rights underneath. It wasn't about housing. It was about rare earth elements. Lithium, cobalt, billions. Jungkook's throat tightened. They knew the mountain was unstable, Jean continued. They wanted it cleared. He leaned back, mind racing. You're telling me the deaths, the landslide, it was never incompetence. No, she said. It was business. Jungkook stood suddenly. He paced the room, hands clenched. His heartbeat was loud in his ears. How do we touch him? He asked. Someone like that, you don't just expose him. You have to gut the entire system around him. We can't, Jean said. Not legally. Then not legally, Jungkook snapped. We leak everything. No filters, no edits. We make the entire country watch. And then what? She shot back. They'll just say it's AI, deepfake, political sabotage. The public doesn't know what's real anymore. We're swimming in lies and filters and noise. He stopped pacing. I need to talk to the boy. Jean frowned. What boy? The survivor. The one who crawled out of the landslide. Her eyes widened. Kang Minjun? Jungkook nodded. He saw something. He's the reason Minister Park started cracking. I think he knows more than he's ever said. Maybe no one asked the right way. Last I heard, he's in Busan, in hiding. Then I'm going to Busan. Alone? No, said a voice from the doorway. It was Seo-jun. He looked exhausted, rain-soaked, eyes bloodshot, but he was holding an envelope marked with the Daesun logo. I got a call from someone inside the conglomerate, he said. They're scared, not loyal, just scared, and they want to talk. Jean narrowed her eyes. Why now? Seo-jun dropped the envelope on the table. Because Chairman Seo isn't just a businessman. He's a war criminal. And there's a file buried deep of what Daesun did in Myanmar, Cambodia, even in Korea, during the protests 10 years ago. Surveillance. Disappearances. Jungkook opened the envelope. Inside were names. Dates. Torture reports. State-sanctioned experiments tied to Daesun research. His fingers trembled as he turned the last page. It was his father's signature. Jimin. Approval of a Daesun project, dated 2 weeks before he was exposed, before he died. Jungkook's breath caught. His father hadn't just fallen. He had been pushed. He dropped the file and staggered back. Jean stood, reaching for him. Jungkook. He shook his head. I need air. Outside, the rain was heavier. It blurred the neon lights. The street was empty, as if the city itself had turned away. Jungkook stared at his reflection in a rain-specked window. He didn't know who he was anymore. Son of a traitor? Voice of justice? Or something in between? Behind him, the monsters were waking, and he wasn't sure he had the strength to keep going. But he had no choice, because in a country devoured by silence, his voice was the only weapon left. The train to Busan was nearly empty. Jungkook sat alone by the window, his face half lit by the orange glow of passing station lights. The file folder Seo-jun had given him sat unopened on the seat beside him, now stained at the corner by a drop of black coffee. He hadn't touched it again. He couldn't. Not since reading his father's name on that last page. He wanted to scream, to tear the signature off the paper. But there was something worse than the rage burning in his chest. Doubt. What if his father had known? What if he hadn't been a scapegoat, but a willing player? A message from Jeon blinked on his burner phone. Jeon, we've confirmed Minjun's location. Old shipping yard outside Jigalchi. But he won't talk to strangers, especially not anyone tied to the government. He thinks they're still watching. Jungkook typed back. Jungkook. Then I won't show up as anyone but myself. The city greeted him with heavy clouds and salt in the air. Busan always smelled like departure wet metal, rotting wood, sea wind carrying secrets too heavy to land. He didn't call a car. He walked. The yard was exactly as Jeon described. Half-collapsed warehouses, rusted fences, stray dogs barking in the distance. A cold wind whistled through broken panels like the ghosts of drowned ships. And there, behind a barricade of stacked containers and debris, was the boy. Kang Minjun. 16. Skin too pale, eyes too old. He sat cross-legged on a plastic chair, a small knife in one hand, carving lines into a block of wood. He didn't look up when Jungkook approached. You're not from here, Minjun said flatly. Jungkook stopped 2 meters away. No, I'm not. You're the guy from TV. I was. Silence. Then Minjun looked up. Why are you here? Jungkook swallowed the lump in his throat. Because I need to know what you saw. Minjun's hand tightened on the knife. Everyone wants something from me. I don't want a quote, Jungkook said softly. I want the truth. I think you've been carrying it too long. Minjun stood. He was thin, too thin, bones visible beneath a stained hoodie. He walked to a rusted desk and pulled out a small camcorder. He placed it on the barrel between them, then clicked play. Static. Then a shaky image. A hillside. Screaming. Dust. And then clear as day. A black SUV. A government plate. Doors flung open. Men in suits pulling out files, throwing them into the back, ignoring the villagers screaming behind them. One of the men turned toward the camera. Yoon Tae-hwan. Beside him. Jungkook froze. It was his father. Jeon Jimin. Younger, thinner, but unmistakable. His father, in a field suit, holding a file stamped with a Dason seal, looking over his shoulder as the landslide began to break in the distance. Minjun paused the tape. Jungkook stared at the frozen frame, lips slightly parted. My dad was there. Yes. He knew. I don't know what he did. I just know he ran, and the others died. Jungkook sat down, breath shallow. Why didn't you release this? Minjun laughed bitterly. I tried. Every time I sent it, someone came looking for me. Police, social workers, men with nice words and dead eyes. I realized it didn't matter who I showed it to. They'd just bury me along with it. Jungkook looked up, jaw trembling. Then why keep it? Because someday, Minjun said, someone like you was going to come. Someone who still believed this country could bleed, honestly. Jungkook reached across the table and gently pushed the camcorder toward himself. Minjun stopped him. One condition. Jungkook looked him in the eyes. Minjun's voice cracked. I want justice, not a news cycle, not a viral moment. Real justice. Jungkook nodded. Then you have it. He left Busan that night with the tape in his coat pocket and an anchor in his chest. Back in Seoul, Jeon, Seojun, and a few loyal insiders were already preparing for the next phase. The files had been sorted, the servers secured. The blackmail photos of Dason's experiments were ready to be released, if only they had something personal, emotional, real. No, they did. They had the boy. Jungkook played the tape in Jeon's apartment, silence stretching between frames. By the end, Her hands were covering her mouth. "He was there," she whispered. "Your father. He wasn't just a witness. He was a collaborator," Jungkook finished, coldly. "No more pretending." Seojun leaned forward. "You release this. They won't just come after your reputation. They'll come after your bloodline, your mother, everything." Jean stood, walking to the window. Or they turned to her. "You go before they can spin it. You go live. Not with edited footage, but with everything. You confess. You claim your father's guilt. You show the boy's footage. You destroy the entire myth in one blow." Jungkook stared at her. "It's suicide," Taehyung said. "It's truth," Jungkook replied. The decision was made. The broadcast would happen in 48 hours. Live, unfiltered, a national confession. The plan was already moving. But outside the building, a single car idled across the street. Inside it, a man in a gray suit picked up a phone. "He's got the tape." A voice on the other end said one word: "Proceed." The car pulled away. And somewhere deep in the blue house, Han Do-yoon opened a drawer containing a single, unregistered pistol. They wouldn't just try to silence Jungkook now. They were going to erase him. Rain had started to fall again. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind that accompanies turning points in movies, but the slow, relentless drizzle that seeps into everything, even your bones. It turned the Seoul skyline into a ghost, blurring the city's glass towers like memories trying to fade. Inside Jean's apartment, the walls were covered with maps, documents, strings pinned between names. The camcorder lay at the center of the table like a heart, waiting to be cut open. The room reeked of stale coffee and sweat. Tension had turned the air acidic. Jungkook stood by the window, watching the lights of the city flicker through the fog. He hadn't slept. He couldn't. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father standing next to Yoon Tae-hwan, watching that mountainside begin to crumble. Jean entered quietly, holding 2 mugs. "You haven't eaten." Jungkook didn't turn. "I don't think I can." She placed the mug beside him. "You will. You have to. You need to be alive tomorrow." His jaw tightened. "Do I?" Jean leaned against the window ledge, arms crossed. "Yes, because if you die, they win. If you disappear, your voice becomes a rumor again, a myth, another young man who could have changed everything. If only..." He turned to her, eyes hollow. "What if I'm no different from them, Jean? What if I've been lying to myself this entire time?" She frowned. "You're not your father. I share his blood. Blood doesn't make choices," she said firmly. "You do." They held each other's gaze for a long, charged moment. There was something unspoken there. Not love, at least not yet, but something older, shared burden, mutual fracture. The door suddenly burst open. Seojun came in, soaked and breathless. His tie was undone. His coat ripped near the collar. He looked like he'd just run through hell. "They know." Jungkook stepped forward. "Who?" "Do-yeon, the Blue House, Daesun, all of them." Seojun threw a damp envelope onto the table. Inside were surveillance photos, grainy but unmistakable Jean entering the safe house in Busan. Jungkook boarding the train. Minjun standing outside a clinic with a hood pulled up. "They have eyes everywhere," he said. "We were stupid to think we had time." Jean's voice was ice. "They're going to kill him." "No," Seojun said. "They're going to discredit him first, frame him for something ugly, criminal, violent. Then, if he doesn't vanish on his own, then they'll clean up the mess." Jungkook walked to the table, opened the envelope again. At the bottom was a printed headline from a Daesun-owned tabloid, scheduled for tomorrow morning. Jungkook linked to militant group. Explosive new evidence emerges. His face was on the front page, red circle around his eyes, the word radicalized in bold beneath. Jeon continued. They fabricated text messages, doctored voice memos, even created a fake chat between you and a known anti-government cell. They're ready to paint you as a threat to national security. Jungkook laughed short and bitter. They're turning me into the villain before I can tell the story. Jean whispered. Then tell it faster. He looked at her. We go live tonight. Taehyung shook his head. You won't even make it to the station. Then we do it from here, Jungkook said. We stream it. No networks, no permissions, no negotiations. And what happens when they cut the signal? Taehyung asked. Jungkook picked up the camcorder. We'll already have said it. An hour later, Jean and Taehyung were wiring the apartment like a war bunker. Microphones, backup batteries, signal boosters, 3 identical laptops broadcasting through mirrored VPNs. Jean's hands were steady. Taehyung's were not. At 2:03 a.m., Jungkook sat in front of the camera. No makeup, no lights, just his face lit by the computer screen and the storm outside. He took a breath. This is Jungkook, he said, and I'm not asking for your trust. I'm asking for your attention. His voice was low, steady, no rage, no performance, only truth. He told them everything. About Yongwon, about Daesun, about his father, about the lies dressed as policy, the deaths hidden as errors, the boy who survived and was silenced, the signatures, the blood. He showed the tape. He named names. He let the images speak. And then he ended with this. If I disappear after tonight, don't let them bury this with me. I am not perfect. I am not innocent. But I will not be quiet. And if you believe this country deserves better be louder than they are. He clicked stop. The video was instantly mirrored on 37 different platforms. Uploaded, downloaded, reshared by strangers and allies alike. It spread like oxygen meeting fire. 10 minutes later, the apartment went dark. Power's cut, Jean whispered. Jungkook stood. Taehyung opened the window and peered into the alley. We need to go. But it was too late. A black van pulled up below. No sirens. No markings. 2 men stepped out, heads down, moving like wolves. They were already climbing the stairwell. Jungkook turned to Jean. Take the boy and go underground. Keep the rest of the files. Don't come back for me. She stepped forward. Don't. But he kissed her forehead. Not out of love. Out of finality. Taehyung grabbed her wrist. We have to move. She hesitated, then ran. Jungkook locked the door behind them. He turned off every light, sat back down at the table. He closed his eyes. The last sound he heard before the door burst open was the distant sound of notifications pinging on 1,000 screens. His story had gone viral. He smiled in the dark. Because even if they erased him now, the truth was already free. Jungkook's chair was still warm when the door blew open. 2 men in black rushed in, guns drawn, flashlights sweeping across the chaos of cords, camera gear, and spilled coffee. The apartment was empty, silent, except for the soft hum of a server box still flickering blue. The broadcast had ended 20 minutes ago. But the fire it ignited was spreading faster than they could have imagined. They searched the apartment, like wolves, top to bottom. Cabinets, vents, floorboards. No sign of Jungkook. But he hadn't gone far. Across the street, on the rooftop of an abandoned building, he lay on his stomach, soaked from the rain, watching them through a pair of old binoculars. Jean's contact had helped him slip out the fire escape just before the blackout. Timing was everything now. Too early, and they'd catch him. Too late, and everything he had built would vanish with him. His phone buzzed once. A single text from Jeon. Safe. Minjun with me. You? He typed quickly, shivering in the cold. Still here. They're inside. Don't come back. A pause. Then another message. You're not alone. People are rising. He didn't respond. He couldn't. His hands were shaking. Inside the van below, one of the agents held a tablet. Streams of live footage flooded the screen, dozens of Jungkook's video clips being reshared across every major platform. YouTube, Naver, TikTok, Telegram, Reddit. Subtitles in 10 languages. Threads dissecting each sentence. Memes, remixes, street art already popping up across Hongdae and Itaewon. One post had already reached 12 million views. Jungkook didn't start a war. He just turned on the lights. The man cursed under his breath. Back at the Blue House, Han Do-yoon stood in a room full of failure. Phones were ringing. Security officers shouted at screens. Aides scrambled to prepare official statements. The president was locked in an emergency briefing. And Do-yoon stood still, arms crossed, watching Jungkook's face play on loop. He turned to General Hwang. This was your idea. Let him speak. Let him burn out. The old general didn't look away from the screen. Something changed, Hwang said. He's not playing defense anymore. He's leading. Do-yoon's lip curled. He's a child. No, Hwang said. He's the future. Do-yoon slammed his hand on the console. Then we erase him. For real this time. That night, Seoul didn't sleep. All across the city, protests began to swell. Students left their classes. Workers abandoned offices. LED trucks played Jungkook's video in traffic. Drones projected it onto buildings. Public squares filled with candles. Fists. Chants. Truth now. Justice now. Truth now. Justice now. In the shadows of it all, Jungkook moved like smoke. He changed clothes, wore masks, moved through alleyways like a fugitive in his own city. But for the first time in days, he felt powerful. Not safe, not fearless, but useful. Each step he took felt like a nail in the coffin of the empire that had killed too many voices before his. He met Jeon and Minjun in an underground gallery in Seongsu. The boy ran into his arms before Jungkook could speak. You didn't die, Minjun whispered. Not yet, Jungkook replied, hugging him tight. Jeon approached, tired but alight. They tried to spin the video, call it AI, but it was too raw, too real. Too many people remember the landslide, the names, the faces. They can't rewrite this one. Jungkook nodded. We need to push further. The Daesun documents, the black sites, the test trials. We don't stop. Seo-jun entered then, breathless. We have someone, a Daesun defector, high level, says he's willing to testify publicly, but only if he speaks with you directly. Who is he? Jungkook asked. Seo-jun hesitated. His name is Seo Min-chul. Jungkook froze, his voice caught in his throat. That's Chairman Seo-jin, Q's son. Jeon stepped back. Are you sure? Positive, Seo-jun said. He hates his father. Says he has recordings, footage, proof that Daesun funneled money to military death squads in Myanmar, funded torture programs during the labor uprisings. Even greenlit experimental chemical tests in rural provinces here in Korea. All of it. Signed, dated. Jeon blinked. Why now? Seo-jun answered. He says your speech made him believe someone might actually do something with the truth. Jungkook rubbed his face, his heart racing. Where is he? Seo-jun checked his phone. He's waiting, right now, in a safe house on Jeju Island. He wants to meet tomorrow. Jungkook looked around the room. At Jeon. At the boy. At the map of a bleeding country. He nodded. I'm going. But far from them, in a polished conference room at Daesun Tower, Chairman Seo Jin-kyu stood silently as his executive team panicked. The files were leaking. Whistleblowers turning. Government allies distancing themselves. But he remained still. Cold. Smiling. He turned to one of his security men. Find my son. The man nodded. And bring me Jungkook, Seo continued, voice quiet and lethal. Alive. Outside, a thunderstorm brewed. And across every screen in Korea, Jungkook's voice echoed into living rooms, subway stations, and silent kitchens. He wasn't just trending. He was becoming a movement. But power never dies quietly. And the men in the shadows had just begun to hunt back. Jeju's skies were black with clouds when Jungkook's plane touched down. The wind howled across the tarmac like a warning. The airport was nearly empty. No fanfare, no cameras, just the low hum of overhead lights and the distant sound of baggage carts echoing down sterile halls. Jungkook moved fast, hood up, sunglasses on, Jeon trailing behind him in a dark coat. Seo-jun had taken a separate flight. The team was split by design, so if one of them was taken, the others might still reach the target. Seo Min-chul, the only living link that could dismantle Daesun from within. He was waiting in a rented fishing villa on the southern coast, surrounded by jagged cliffs and rough sea. According to their contact, Min-chul hadn't left the villa in 6 days. He was paranoid, unstable, but disparate. And desperate men had the most dangerous truths. Jungkook didn't speak until they were in the car. The rain thudded violently on the windshield as Jeon drove in silence. Do you think he's sincere? Jungkook finally asked. Jeon didn't take her eyes off the road. Sincerity doesn't matter. If he has what he says he does, then we use it. Even if he hates his father for petty reasons, betrayal is still betrayal. Jungkook leaned his head against the window. I've never seen this country burn so quietly before. Jeon gave a bitter smile. It's not quiet. It's just holding its breath. The villa came into view near midnight. The ocean roared just beyond the rocky cliff. There were no other houses nearby, just one rusted SUV parked in the gravel lot and a light on in the top window. Seo-jun was already inside when they arrived. He opened the door quickly, eyes flicking between them and the darkness behind. He's not well, Seo-jun whispered. Jungkook stepped in. The villa smelled of cigarettes, sweat, and sea salt. Curtains were drawn. Empty bottles littered the floor. A table in the center of the room held a laptop, several hard drives, and a handgun. And slouched in a chair, eyes bloodshot and skin pale, was Seo Min-chul. He looked up when Jungkook entered, and despite the fatigue, there was something sharp behind his gaze, like a man who'd lived too long with ghosts and was now bargaining with them. You're braver than I thought, Min-chul said. Jungkook didn't answer. He walked to the table, glanced at the hard drives. You said you had files. Evidence. Min-chul laughed bitterly. Straight to business, just like my father. Jungkook stared him down. Don't compare me to that man. Min-chul tilted his head. Why not? You both wear suits. You both deliver speeches. The only difference is he never lied about what he was. Jungkook stepped forward. I'm not here to debate morality. Either you want to bring down your father, or you don't. Min-chul stood, unsteady. You think I want to betray him? You think it's that simple? He grabbed the nearest hard drive and threw it onto the table. This one has footage from our Myanmar facility. Daesun paid mercenaries to clear villages for lithium mines. They didn't just shoot. They tested gas. Gas my father's labs developed. Jeon paled. Chemical weapons? Min-chul nodded slowly. Not officially, Not on the books. But I was there. I oversaw supply chains. I signed off on the shipments. And when I told him I wanted out, his voice cracked. He told me I was no son of his. Seo-jun whispered, "Why are you doing this now?" Min-chul looked at Jungkook, then Jeon. "Because for the first time in my life, someone told the truth and didn't die. You made people care. And if I disappear, I want it to matter." He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small black card. "This decrypts the drive. Don't lose it." Jungkook took it carefully, hand trembling. "What's on the other drives?" Min-chul smirked, something haunted in his face. "Everything. Bribes, surveillance contracts, biological experiments in rural Korea. Daesun has its fingers in every ministry, every network, every company. My father owns this country. But this?" He tapped the drive. "This can turn him into a fugitive, or a corpse." They stared at each other. Something electric passed between them. The son of a corporate dictator, the son of a disgraced minister, both carrying the stains of their fathers. The silence was broken by a single sound. A footstep on gravel outside. Seo-jun froze. Jean's hand went to the pistol in her coat. Min-chul whispered, "They found me." Then the first shot shattered the window. Jungkook hit the floor as glass exploded around them. Jean pulled her gun and fired twice through the shattered pane. Seo-jun dragged the table down, flipping it as a barricade. Min-chul dove behind a bookshelf. "There's a tunnel. In the bathroom." They sprinted, ducking as more bullets tore through the villa. Jungkook grabbed the drive. Jean grabbed the laptop. Seo-jun pulled Min-chul with him as they ran toward the back room. The bathroom looked like nothing special, but Min-chul kicked aside the floor tiles, revealing a rusted metal hatch. He flung it open and jumped down first. Jean followed. Then, Jungkook. As Seo-jun was about to climb in, a bullet tore into his shoulder. He screamed. Jungkook reached up, grabbed his arm, pulled him down with every ounce of strength he had. They fell hard. The hatch slammed shut above them. They landed in darkness. Only the sounds of shallow breaths and distant waves remained. A flashlight clicked on. Jean's face came into view, streaked with dirt and blood. "We need to move. Now." They scrambled through the narrow passage, barely wide enough for two people. It reeked of mildew and old salt. After 20 minutes of crawling, they emerged on a secluded rocky path that led down to the sea. Min-chul collapsed against a boulder. "There's a boat," he gasped. "Past the bend. I kept it hidden." Seo-jun clutched his shoulder, bleeding heavily. Jungkook turned to him, voice cracking. "You stay with him. I'll get the boat." "No," Seo-jun grunted. "You're not going alone." Jungkook didn't argue. He just ran. The rain lashed harder now. The sea roared louder, but ahead, barely visible, was a small fishing boat hidden under a tarp. He uncovered it, started the motor. By the time Jean and the others reached the dock, the lights of another van were cresting the ridge behind them. Min-chul turned to Jungkook, eyes fierce. "Take it. Take the drive. Take everything. Finish it." "What about you?" Jungkook asked. "I'm the dead son of a king," Min-chul said. "You're the living spark of a nation." Jungkook hesitated, then grabbed the tiller. Jean jumped on. Seo-jun looked back once, blood dripping down his hand. And Min-chul stood on the dock as they pulled away into the storm. He didn't run. He faced the van, and when they shot him, he didn't scream. Jungkook didn't look back. He only gripped the drive in his palm and whispered to himself, "This ends with me.